One of you asked a very important question on the channel recently, one I've really had to think about, because the last time I gave this kind of advice to someone, their life ended up in a catastrophe of clusterfuck proportions. So what is the question? Well, it's location. Do you have to live in London or LA in order to cut a career as a media, film, TV, computer games composer? Obviously, there's a huge sense of irony in answering this, or is it a paradox? You know, a man who's harboured ambitions of Oscar stardom, of life working in Hollywood, California, but has instead ended up in Holyrood, Caledonia, and the only sniff of an Oscar I've got is the pong of this blue roan Cocker Spaniel. I think I went wrong with my Visboard somewhere. After 2 weeks careful consideration about this question, I've come up with 3 answers. Yes, no, and maybe. And before you fuck off to Junkie's channel for some advice you can actually use, I do actually conclude with a strategy that I think is quite useful. I guess if you're going to assist for a composer, you're pretty stuck to wherever they're going to be based. But I guess the most important thing is if you want to be part of the scene, it's best to be in the scene. If you want to make networks, you've got to be where the action's happening. And I guess the third reason is, I guess, to have your finger on the pulse, to be part of the zeitgeist, which is also kind of bollocks, because I'm not sure if LA and London are the kind of the hubs of the zeitgeist. If you look at the kind of disruptors who are based out in Reykjavik, Iceland, they're having as much impact on the kind of the film music stage as any other composers. So I guess that's something, I've not done the research, but I guess that's something that you've got to look at the composers who have been nominated for Oscars over the last 3 or 4 years, and I think you'll probably find that 50% of them are not based in LA or London. I guess the main reason not to move to LA or London is something that I talked about in another film, and that is overheads. There is no overhead greater than moving to London, or certainly to LA. A great thundering cloud of cost commitment that you will make. Another thing to consider is, because of the granularization of channels and content output, we're all expected to do 4 times as much, 4 times as quickly, for 1/4 of the price. This is no different from producers and directors, which basically means that the likelihood of them being able to come and spend time with you in your massive London pad is going to be, restricted. In fact, I would say it's a 2-year anniversary this November for me of anyone coming to visit me in my London studio. I guess if it works for the Icelandics, it could work for anyone. In fact, I know of people who say they're based in LA and actually work in the south coast of England. There's great communities down in Brighton. It's just the way that it's done these days. It's done by email, and producers and directors don't really have a problem with it. You may just not like the culture there. These places are pretty hardcore. This leads me on to the maybe part of the answer, and it's, well, what are your plans? Are you wanting to work your way up as an HOD? Well, then naturally you're going to have to kind of base yourself in a hub. Are you going to be a disruptor like the Icelandics that I speak of? Well, if you're going to go in, left field from an artistic route, then you simply don't have to live in LA or London. I guess it's also just where you are in your stage of life. Do you have kids? Are you about to have kids? Are you married? Are you single? Are you planning to settle down? Are you a family type? All of these things you have to really seriously consider. And what do you need from life? What do you need to be happy? It's your journey. It really, at the beginning of your career, you're in a position to actually pick. My personal feeling is, no matter who you are, what stage in your life, you basically need to go and try before you fly. And, I think the attrition rate between London and LA is remarkably high. And I've seen people at all different stages of their careers do amazing kind of goodbyes to their families and friends, only to return a couple of weeks later. So what I would recommend is head out to where you think you may need to be and spend at least 6 weeks, not just staying and living, but working there. If I have 2 pieces of advice as a Willie, someone who lives 700 miles away from the hub of where my profession is, that is, if a producer asks you to come in for an extra spotting session, it's like, well, that's going to cost me 200 quid because I've got to fly in from Valencia. This is your issue. But the other thing that's really important to consider is that in any given job, I believe we have 3 lifelines, and of which you can definitely only use 2. The first is
my equipment has failed, I'm going to have to cancel the session. The second is my kids' basketball practice overran and he's had a nervous breakdown. A family thing, you know, you can only use one of those. And, or, you know, basically I've got a stomach bug and piss is coming out of my arse. You can only use 2 of those 3. But if you live far away from where you work, you basically have to extend the number of lifelines and reduce the number that you can use them. Namely, my plane has been kind of cancelled or has crashed, and the train is running late. Now you factor those 2 in, you have to understand that basically you need to be willing to travel with piss coming out of your